All right, everybody. So let's take that from the top. We're going to convene the August 20th meeting of the Marin Clean Energy Board of Directors. And the first item on our agenda are board announcements. Yes, Craig?
Yeah, I'd like to announce that on Tuesday night, it was discovered. The board was the whole City Council of El Cerrito was already deep green, but apparently MCE didn't know that, and they came and were challenging us to be deep green, and we already were. But I understand as a result of that, we are the first council to all be deep green in California, and so I guess as the last group to join, we're wondering why you guys didn't lead the way. So I guess I've got to challenge you guys to try and get your councils to be all deep green like El Cerrito. Also, that night I did learn that El Cerrito has the highest deep green participation rate, and I think I saw, Jamie, that you'll be covering that in your presentation. So.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Really good. Really good. Yeah, and we've got some new faces. Welcome, Larry Chu, Peter Lax. We have some other new faces? No, the rest of it is just us, so welcome. Yeah. All right, terrific. That was not disrespectful. You resemble that, I know you do. Other board announcements, yes.
I just want to say I'm here as alternate for Tom Butt. The last time I substituted for him, you were in the old building, so it's so nice to be in this building. It's beautiful.
Fantastic. Welcome. That's great. Okay. Public open time. Anyone here who'd like to talk in public open time on items not on our agenda? Seeing none. Dawn, report from Chief Executive Officer.
Okay, great. I have just a couple of items this morning. Just a reminder to state your name if you can when you begin speaking on a particular agenda item. This will help our minutes taker to keep track of who's who based on the voice recording. Also, we've learned by experimentation with the mics that it actually works better if the mic's a little bit farther away from you. And it's okay if you want to leave your mic on throughout the meeting. I think shuffling of papers might cause some disruption in the noise, but if you're sitting still and want to keep your mic on, I don't think that'll be a problem. We'll let you know if that changes. Next, I wanted to thank you all for your input regarding the annual retreat topics. As a reminder, our annual retreat will be held on September 17th, which is actually the day of our board meeting, which gets you all off the hook for an evening board meeting that day. But on the hook for a full day of fun talking about MCE. The three of the items that will be focused on that day include strategic planning for the coming year with a highlight on procurement. We'll also be talking about MCE inclusion of new communities and next steps there. And then we'll also have some presentations on emerging technologies and best practices swap. This time around, we're trying to get some presentations from some of our member communities that are doing some interesting things around green energy, green building, and gray water. So it should be an interesting retreat, and we look forward to seeing you all there next month. I wanted to let folks know that the Ad Hoc Expansion Committee met on new community inclusion in July and made some good progress. We'll be meeting again next week on Monday at 10 a.m. And then we'll be reporting out to TechCom and XCom in early September and potentially wrapping up on next steps at our retreat meeting. And then I wanted to turn it over to Jeremy Wayne from our team, who's going to provide a brief overview on structural rate changes. I know some of you all have heard about these rate changes in the news, and so we wanted to make sure you are up to speed on them. This is just going to be a quick overview, but we'll have more detail and analysis provided in the TechCom in early September if you're interested in more information on that. So, you ready, Jeremy?
Yeah, well, thank you.
Okay. Welcome, Jeremy.
I believe so. All right, so some of you may recognize me because I just gave a similar presentation in the TechCom and XCom recently, but this presentation is a little revised in that I'm talking about two different types of rate changes that are going on. There was an ongoing proceeding at the Commission dealing with residential rates and how to restructure residential rates. There's a decision that was reached in that proceeding that has some very substantial changes to the structure of residential rates going forward. Most of these changes will start in January of next year or around then. And then the second element is that every year there's a proceeding with PG&E, their Energy Resource Recovery Account, their ERA proceeding. And in this proceeding is where they file their revenue requests for their bundled customers, as well as the revenue requests for the PCIA and the cost allocation mechanism. PCIA being power charge and difference adjustment. And as you're well aware, both the PCIA and CAN have substantial impacts on our ability to compete
Blush.
with PG&E. So I'll go into that in a little more detail. Looking at slide 2, regarding the residential rate changes, there are, start off by saying there are 2 main categories of residential rates: the default rates and then the voluntary rates, time of use rates. So the changes illustrated on this slide are really highlighting the changes to the default rate structure. Currently, there are 4 tiers of usage on customers' rates, residential customers' rates. The main element of this decision is that it will be reduced to 2 tiers, and that 2-tier transition will occur over several years. The differential between those tiers will also change with time. There's also a reduction of the care discount that low-income customers will be able to receive, which is unfortunate. And there's also an increase in the minimum billing amount, the monthly minimum billing amount that customers will see on their bills, which will be something that our customers will certainly notice. Slide 3 goes into more detail about how the transition from 4 tiers to 3 tiers will occur. And then slide 4 on that handout goes into the changes that are happening with time of use rates. As you're likely aware, there are presently two time of use rates, true time of use rates, the E7 and E6 rates. And then there's also a seasonal rate, which is E8, and our equivalents are Res 6, Res 7, Res 8. What's happening here is that the Commission has realized that the peak periods for these time of use rates are out of date, essentially. That the true peak period of demand on the grid is no longer the middle of the day, it's late in the day. And it's no longer, there is still a summertime peak with AC load, but they're realizing there's more and more of a evening peak in the spring and fall months that's becoming more and more difficult to meet. So what they're doing is they are closing enrollment for the E6 rate starting next year, and then they are terminating the E7 and E8 rates, which have been closed to new enrollment for some time now. What this means specifically for our customer base, or especially for our customer base, is that a lot, or I would say the majority of our rooftop solar customers participate in either E6 or E7 rates. And so this will be a significant change to the way they're able to monetize and recover the costs of the rooftop solar that they've installed. There is going to be a new rate that PG&E is working on called their E time of use rate that will be what people are switched to from E7 and E8 schedules. However, this time of use rate will have a different peak period, so it's describing. And it's still in the works, but it'll either be a 4 p.m. to 9 p.m. peak, or it will be a 3 p.m. to 8 p.m. peak. The other element that was pointed out to me just earlier today is that their summer season is actually being shortened to fewer months in the year on that schedule as well. So there's less of a summer peak period, which is really the prime time to be monetizing your rooftop solar. So we're still, the decision states that these changes need to occur January 1st of 2016. The reality, after talking to staff at the utilities, is that they don't even think that date is feasible, so they're pushing, and they just filed a formal letter with the Commission requesting that these changes happen in March of 2016. But either way, we want to get ahead of this and start warning our customers that these changes are occurring. And I suppose the one silver lining is that because the E6 rate is simply being closed but not terminated, customers on E6 will have 5 years to then move to a new time of use rate. So what we are thinking of doing is sending out communications and advisements to our net energy metering customers to switch to the E6 rate schedule by the end of the calendar year, so that they at least have that rate schedule, and it's better peak periods than the new alternatives that will be coming out for the next 5 years to ease their transition. There's also the potential for current rooftop solar customers to install batteries, which would then allow them to shift their flowing back of electricity to the grid to a later period in the day that better coincides with the peak periods. But this is definitely going to have some material changes to how rooftop solar and the finance of rooftop solar really plays out. Then the last slide I have here is dealing with the proposed changes that are in the 2016 ERA filing, the PG&E filed in June. As I explained, this is an annual cycle. Unfortunately, it's a very compressed cycle, so they filed in June, and they're asking for changes to rates that would be effective January 1st the following year, so 2016. Amongst the changes they're asking for is a rather substantial increase in the PCIA. For residential customers, as you'll see there, it'll be up to a 72% increase for the PCIA. The range is about, I think it's 68 to 72, so it's all about 70% increase. All customer classes are going to see an increase, but unfortunately the way that the methodology of the PCIA plays out, residential customers get hit the hardest. Based upon just kind of back of the envelope calculation, if our forecasted load for 2015 was the same for 2016, just accounting for this change in the PCIA as PG&E has proposed, it would amount to over a $3 million collection from our customers over the course of 2016. And I believe for 2015 it would be approximately $19 million. So that's a $11 million swing, an $11 million increase of drain on our communities, which is quite substantial. So we're doing all that we can to, I guess, resist this change and plead for the Commission to consider alternatives, to consider mitigating some of the increase, or providing some protection for CCA customers against this volatility that we're seeing in the PCIA. As far as just the plain numbers of the methodology, the numbers check out. It's not that PG&E is somehow stacking the books. The numbers are what they are, but it becomes more of a policy question. Is this truly fair for CCA customers? And we really don't think it is. The last bit I'll point out is that the potential impact on the customer's bill, residential light green customer, if you're comparing just the generation charges, PG&E, if they stayed bundled customers versus MCE, they take MCE light green in 2016, assuming our rates do not change at all, and assuming that both the PCIA increases, as PG&E has proposed, and their bundle rate decreases a little bit as they've proposed, it would mean that our rates with the PCIA rolled in would appear to be a cent per kilowatt hour more expensive than PG&E's rate. And of that 1 cent, 0.8 of it is because of the PCIA, 0.2 of it is because of the decrease in the generation rate. So it's really the PCIA that's cutting into our ability to compete. So absolutely, PCIA is our priority number one within the regulatory team, especially for this coming year. And we were already, just last week I filed some testimony on this matter. We are preparing legal briefs, leveraging some very talented external counsel to help us on these efforts. Now, thankfully, with Sonoma and Lancaster operational, they're also fighting the fight. So we are going to give it our all and see what we can do.
Great, thank you, Jeremy. Sloan, questions from the board?
Can you explain, do we have a basis to challenge, the PCIA and the CAM rate? And secondly, assuming that we do, what is the mechanism for doing that? And thirdly, assuming that we have a basis and we have a process to challenge it, what sort of deadlines, or when do we find out whether or not our customers are going to have to pay?
So we certainly have a basis for challenging it. The challenge is really, what is the right venue for raising that challenge?
What's the basis, though?
Well, so the basis there, the Commission has a history of decisions leading up, authorizing exit fees, discussing how CCAs should be implemented, and especially in relation to exit fees, such as the PCIA. And in that, there's very clear language about how CCA customers need to be protected from rate shock, how CCA customers need to be protected from volatility of rates, uncertainty of rates. There's further language in there about how the PCIA itself should not be bestowing a competitive advantage for the investor-owned utilities against CCA. This is clearly doing so here with this large swing. There's language as well about, I was just looking at all this today, how the PCIA should, by design, should be as close to zero as possible and should drop off, should disappear with time. What we've really seen in the course of the 5 years that we've been serving customers is it doesn't seem to be going away. And so there does seem to be some growing awareness within the Commission that there may be some disconnects between the methodology that they've authorized for the PCIA and the policy that was put in place first and govern that methodology. The challenge about the venue is that the ERA proceedings are traditionally strictly about methodology, strictly about compliance, making sure they've crunched the numbers correctly and not considering any policy matters. Now, we have gotten a little bit of policy to be explored in the 2015 ERA proceeding, which is still ongoing. It may change the way that PCIA is applied to customers in terms of their vintaging. There may be potential with 2016's proceeding to have something similar happen, or it may simply be that the Commission acknowledges in the 2016 proceeding that the policy needs to be revisited. This proceeding is not the right venue, but they then may tee up the right venue. But unfortunately, it's a very convoluted way that the Commission keeps telling us to address it on a case-by-case basis rather than giving us a single proceeding where we can comprehensively reevaluate PCIA.
So the ERA, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, no, please.
So the ERA proceeding is only about whether the data in the formula is correct or incorrect. The formula itself cannot be or should not ordinarily be challenged during the ERA proceedings. But do we have a mechanism then for raising that argument, that the formula is wrong, that PCIA shouldn't be applied, or that it's serving the opposite function from insulating from rate shock and is giving competitive advantage and so on and so forth? How do we get the right people to hear those substantive arguments?
Well, whether or not we can get any true movement within the ERA, we're still making the arguments, we're still presenting the arguments with every opportunity that we have, with the hope that either the Commission will be a little more ambitious with the scope than they usually are in that proceeding, or be willing to redirect matters to another proceeding where it could be more broadly considered. The other challenge of ERA proceedings is that typically only the one utility participates in the individual ERA proceeding. They participate in their own ERA, but they don't wade into the ERAs of the other utilities. And the problem is, if you're trying to adjust the policy of PCIA and exit fees, that needs to be done uniformly across the three utilities. So then it becomes an issue of, well, what is the right venue? Could it be the long-term procurement planning process, the LTPP? We've been trying there, and the problem with that proceeding is it's so busy that the Commission keeps promising to address some of our concerns and then keeps getting to the end of the calendar and realizing, oh, we don't have time, we'll put it in the next cycle and the next cycle. So we are trudging on and trying every avenue that comes our way, and we, as I was saying with the 2015 ERA, we actually got a second phase to really look at how customer vintages are implemented specifically for CCAs. And there's real opportunity to really change the way that the PCIA ultimately impacts our customers there, but it's just an incremental step.
Right.
And there's certainly more steps that need to be taken across more venues, and whether it's working within the existing proceedings or fighting for a new proceeding, that's a challenge we keep going around and around and around with.
And if I might tag on to that, in 2012 we actually did engage with the CPUC to adjust the PCIA methodology, and we were successful. We actually were able to bring the PCIA down by about 50%. So that continues to have an ongoing impact on the PCIA. It would have been a lot higher this coming year if we hadn't engaged at that time. It was a very heavy lift on our part and on the part of other parties that joined with us to make these changes, and opening up the PCIA formula is not something that the CPUC staff or the CPUC in general really has a big appetite for, because it's very, takes a lot of time, it's very in the weeds. I think it's something that we could consider down the road, but because it was done in 2012, it may not be the best course of action to make a big change at this point. What we're seeing is other approaches might be more useful, focusing on vintaging, focusing on mitigation issues from one year to the next, so that customers aren't having a huge increase from one year to the next. That's often the case with rates. They're often kind of caps that go into place to ensure that customers aren't having too big of an impact from one year to the next. So that's an approach that we might be looking at. I think that, as Jeremy mentioned, because they seem to have an appetite for taking up some of the PCIA issues now in the ERA proceeding, we're going to be pursuing that a bit. And you may have noticed that on our agenda this evening we have a PCIA item number 8. We're actually going to be continuing that item to a future board meeting until we have been able to collect more information on what's happening in the ERA proceeding and determining what's the best course of action on the PCIA.
And when will we find that out?
I think we'll have more information within the next month.
Can I turn your microphone over to someone else?
Of course.
No, you don't literally have to. Gary, and then come
Yeah,
back.
I noticed you mentioned that we're planning to decrease generation fees for BG&E. Is that going to be offset by an increase on transmission and distribution costs on the other side to make up for it?
I believe that the decrease to their bundled rate is because of it's changes in their forecast of how much of a bundled load they're expecting to serve. So it's not really a matter of shifting costs between generation and distribution.
Okay.
It's more they're realizing that as there's been increased participation in CCAs from our growth, from Sonoma's growth, as there's been increased adoption of energy efficiency and increased adoption of distributed generation like rooftop solar, they're realizing that the amount of electricity that they need to go out and purchase is decreasing. And as such, some of the costs associated with that are decreasing as well. So that's really why their bundled rate's decreasing. It's not, thankfully, this time around the cost shifting conundrum.
I would think they would be arguing they would be losing, what they would be losing was the lower cost portion of their energy generation. They'd be arguing just the opposite of that, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Is you would think that at the higher end, in cutting back their costs, they would be cutting back, or they would be losing the benefit of lower cost stuff.
Yeah, it's a it quickly gets very, very complex with procurement because it's all about the length of the contracts and the terms of the contracts. And as they realize they need to buy less, they'll buy less short term, but they still have their long, medium term contracts that they're held to. There's also, we're in our third year of a drought, so there's the fluctuations in the hydrological cycle and the amount of extra power that they're having to buy there for the lack of hydro generation that they have. So there's a lot of factors that play into it, and it's challenging to, especially as a market participant, to sift through what numbers we're allowed to see and vet that those numbers are really as they should be.
Did you have a question?
Yes, yeah. I vaguely remember that there were some either discussions or an actual waiver or reduction of the PCIA for care customers. Is that in existence, and will that remain in existence?
So that is another angle at the PCIA that we've been working towards. We tried raising that in a couple of proceedings. First in the 2015 era, where it was not taken up, and then in the CARE and ESAP, the Energy Saving Assistance Program proceeding, the low-income proceeding. And there too, the issue, the judge decided that the issue was outside of scope. So we are still trying to find the right home to really address the policy question of whether it is fair and reasonable to collect PCIA from care-eligible customers. At present, PG&E is the only utility that does apply the PCIA to care-eligible customers. And because of the way that the care discount applies to customers' bills and the way that the PCIA applies to bills, for two households with the same usage, where one is eligible for care and the other is not, they're both paying the same PCIA. There's no reduction in the PCIA either to acknowledge the fact that these households have a lower means of finance. Based upon I don't have it on the slide here, but just based on the numbers I was crunching this morning, for the average residential household, we would say it's about 500 kilowatts, 508, I believe. The monthly PCIA charge amounts to about $6 per month presently, and with this change, it would amount to about $10 per month. So that's a pretty noticeable swing. Yeah.
Do you have another question?
Sorry, yes.
That's okay.
So Dawn, instead of challenging the formula itself, the alternate plan here is to mitigate the effect of it by challenging its application or something? I didn't fully understand your response before.
Yeah, I think that we have a couple of options that we are grappling with, and probably better not to get into too much detail at this point before we have more information. We should have information in the next month, but I can just provide a few examples. One example of approach we are likely to take is looking at how to minimize the year-over-year impact of a steep increase on customers, maybe a 15% cap or a 30% cap year-over-year, so that customers aren't seeing such a steep jump like we're expecting to be seeing on January 1. Looking at the care issue in particular, and highlighting the fact that care customers aren't being charged at PCIA in the other IOU territories. I think that's a second approach that we're likely to be looking at. So I think that we'll have more information soon regarding whether we want to take any additional steps beyond what we're already doing. Oh, and I should mention that we're already seeing a little bit of traction on the vintaging issue. And just to explain what that means is that when a customer departs from PG&E service, they're assigned a vintage in that year. And that vintage is in place to determine what their PCIA should be, and also, more importantly, when their PCIA should sunset. What happens currently is that when a customer moves from one home to another, one place of residence to another within our service territory, they may be getting assigned a new vintage. And we don't think that makes a whole lot of sense. With that in place, assuming folks move every 5 to 10 years, they may never stop paying PCIA fees. So that's something that we're addressing through the ERA, and we're hopeful that we'll have some positive outcomes there.
Okay. I mean, we all recognize how hard you and your team work. From my own perspective, though, this is as dramatic a negative thing as MCE's had to face in a very, very long time. And as a matter of prioritization, it's hard to imagine something more important, at least in the short term. Mm-hmm. That's my own perspective. I don't know. I'm sure other people have views as well.
We had challenges last year, too. Of a different sort.
But if you harken back to a year and a half or 2 years ago, we were advocating for a sunsetting of the PCI, and we were seeing potential traction on that issue. Now we've gone the absolute opposite. I mean, this is a complete reversal of what we were hoping for.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up. I know we're getting a little into the weeds here on this particular issue, but it's important. One of the things that we're seeing as we have been successful with a lot of CCA interest across the state, and there have been a lot of CCAs interested in launching a program. The investor-owned utilities are expressing a lot of concern at the legislative level about how they're being protected against the customer departure. And the PCIA has become an important thing for them to latch on to prevent them from instituting even new means of trying to shift costs onto departing customers. I think that the place where we've seen this be most prominent is in San Diego, where in San Diego there is an IOU, San Diego Gas and Electric. If San Diego County were to launch a CCA program, that would be a much more dramatic impact on their service area than we are in PG&E service area. And so the role of the PCIA in that community has actually been kind of important to prevent further imposition of cost shifting onto potentially departing load customers. And so the conversation has changed a bit as we've seen more CCAs spring up across the state. I think the efforts that we're trying to take are, as Jeremy said, our biggest priority right now. But I think it's fair to say that we have more folks engaged on this topic than we've seen before, and it's making the topic a little more complex because we have a lot more parties engaged.
To add to the complexity, and this is, I find it a little amusing, the green tariffs that the utilities have been slowly trying to implement and will eventually get implemented. For the decision that authorized those programs, that decision requires participants in those programs to also pay the PCIA. So now it will be a opportunity for the utilities to experience firsthand, and have their customers experience firsthand the just unfair nature of the PCIA. And there was actually a communication, an ex parte communication circulated around where some PG&E representatives were speaking with some commission individuals about their concerns of the PCIA inhibiting the enrollment process for their green tariff program, realizing that it would be a major deterrent for people to participate in the programs. So, as Don's saying, the environment and the stage as a whole is changing quite a bit. As the CCA front becomes more diverse and sophisticated, and as more and more customers are participating in CCA, that's changing. And certainly as more of these unusual programs like the Green Tariff come along, it's really proving to the Commission that the policies and the assumptions that they used to implement PCIA way back when are due for a second examination or a third examination.
Any other questions for Jeremy? Great, thank you, Jeremy. Don, anything else in your report? All right, very good. So let's move on next to our consent calendar. We have 4 items on there. The first is the meeting minutes, and I think I'd like to take that separately in case we have any abstentions. Any discussion, corrections, comments on the minutes? All right, seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve.
I move the minutes.
Have a
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any abstentions?
Abstain.
Okay, it would probably be helpful to state your name for the record for our biographer.
City of Larkspur, abstain.
Gail McLaughlin, City of Richmond.
Thank you, and,
Peter Locke,
yeah.
I'll abstain too, obviously.
Okay. Great, thank you, Peter. And any opposition to that motion? All right, so now let's move on to the other 3 items on our consent calendar. Any discussion on any of those items? Seeing none, someone like to make a motion to approve the remainder of the consent calendar?
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Any opposition? Any abstentions? Thank you. Okay, so next is item 5 on our agenda, which is the monthly budget report and audited financial statements for fiscal year 2014-15. John?
Yeah,
Evening.
I'm gonna cover this one. My name's John DeLessie, and so we're 3 months into the fiscal year, and the financials are tracking pretty well with the projections that were used to set the budget. The MCE's revenues and cost of power, which tend to track pretty closely, are slightly under the budgeted amounts, and that's a result of slightly lower realized retail sales. But they're pretty close, within a couple of % of the budgetary numbers. The other operating expense and non-power expenses are tracking under budgeted amounts. We do expect those to sort of even out over the course of the year. So basically, things are looking as budgeted. Actuals are coming in pretty close. So yeah, that's it. That's a quick briefing. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to
We
answer.
also have Mike Maher here who's going to give an overview of the audited financial statements.
Super, great. Good evening, Mike.
Good evening. I will try to make this quick, not that quick. So the budget, or right after the budget, you'll see the packet for the financial statements. And just, I mean, all of you are probably, involved in other agencies, other governments, so every year your agencies get audited, right? Marine Clean Energy gets audited every year. An independent outside accounting firm comes in. It's Avnick Tran Day, a well-known audit firm in California. They do a lot of government audits. They have a lot of experience in that area. So they come here and they review our financial statements, our processes, various financial transactions. they test controls and all that. And then they give their official opinion on whether the financial statements are presented fairly and within conformity with GAAP, or generally accepted accounting principles. And in addition, I'll point out any weaknesses or deficiencies, and that'll all be part of some of the letters that they provide. So we can go into that. Before preceding the financial statements is the letter to the board that kind of goes through the auditor's disclaimers, responsibilities, and this is where they will point out any material weaknesses or deficiencies, and we're very pleased to say there were none. There were not even any recommendations. So very clean report. It is unusual to get through with nothing, so that's something I want to just point out. So that was very good. So you can go over that later, and that is different than as we go to the actual financial statements. The nice cover page there. After the table of contents is the actual auditor's report, the letter. And again, a lot of this stuff is boilerplate stuff. It's very similar with a lot of audits. It's a 2-page report. On the second page, page 2, they give their opinion. I'll just read that real quick. This is from the auditors. In our opinion, the financial statements referred to above present fairly in all material respects the respective financial position of Marin Clean Energy as of March 31st, 2015 and 14, and the respective changes in financial position and cash flows for the years then ended in accordance with accounting principles generally accepted in the United States of America. So that, again, is a clean opinion. It's the highest mark. It's unqualified. That's what we're always shooting for. So these financial statements can be relied upon, and they're accurate. Okay, so I'll go through some of them. It's a long report. There's no need to go through everything. But just so you kind of understand the basic layout of these statements, it starts off with that report, and then followed by a management discussion and analysis, which is a basic overview, kind of review, bullet point type format of the financial statements themselves. And it talks about the changes from one year to the next. It's a really helpful guide for any of you who aren't, that knowledgeable about the actual financial statements. This is a good, I encourage you to read this. It kind of gives you just an overview. It's more or less pretty straightforward. So I'll skip over that law. That's better to kind of read through than to just point out that that's for the first few pages there. So that might be helpful. So we'll go to the actual financial statements themselves, starting on page 7. The statement of net position. It's like just a balance sheet, right? You might call it a balance sheet. In the government accounting, call it the statement of net position. And it's handy. We have the 2 years side by side, so you can kind of see the comparisons from 14 to 15. And as expected, MCE grew, right? So pretty much across the board, we're going to see larger numbers in 2015, both our assets and our liabilities, of course. So just to point out a few items, cash increased about 23%, and not all that, some of that cash is energy efficiency funds. Obviously, much of it needs to be used for working capital on a month-by-month basis. So that's a large dollar, but a lot of that stuff is being used. It's not all, can't all go to be invested or something like that. So there's a purpose for a lot of those funds. Accounts receivable, $10.5 million. That's a 15% increase from the prior year. Those are amounts of actual bills that have gone out to customers, so they've actually received a statement, or we've mailed out a statement, and that's distinct from accrued revenues, a couple lines down, $4.5 million. That's our estimate of customer usage up to the end of the year that has yet to be billed. So they're in the middle of a billing cycle. Okay, so we estimate what that bill is going to be for that portion. So the combination of accounts receivable and accrued revenue is what customers owe us, and that will be hopefully converted to cash within a few months after that fiscal year. Okay, so those are the big, that really comprises the bulk of our assets, those 3 items. And the total assets, almost $28 million. That's about a quarter, 25% increase from the prior year. So that is good. Liabilities also increased. Our biggest expense is cost of energy, so our biggest liability at the year end is accrued cost of energy. This is what we owe our suppliers. All of the terms are within 30 days after the month end, so those are going to be paid shortly after year end. See some other big items. Advances from grantor, in current liability section, $2.2 million. That's energy efficiency funds that we have received. that have not yet been spent. Some of it is earmarked, some of it is set aside for our one-bill repayment program, kind of as a collateral, so not all that money is going to be spent right away, but it's being used. And as we use those expenses on qualified expenses, we will recognize the revenue and remove that liability. It's kind of like a deferred revenue. Okay, and then notes payable to the bank, both current and non-current. We talked about a couple months ago, we paid those off in April, so this is the last statement that has these on them, so that makes my life a little easier too. Those are all gone. And then we go to the bottom line, net position. Remember, assets minus liabilities is net position, which we break out in three components. Capital assets, which matches the asset above in asset section. Restricted for debt service. This is collateral on those loans that we no longer have, so that has been converted and brought back to cash. And then our unrestricted balance, 12.25 million. And our overall net position increased about 38% from the prior year. So it was a good year. At the margins are still not significant from, if you look at the total revenues for the year, we're still operating tight, but we were able to put a little bit more away to reserves than we did last year. Okay, the next page, statement of revenues, expenses. Now you see the budget, so these numbers are pretty much the same as you see with the budget. Some exceptions, that's on a modified accrual basis. This is on a full accrual basis. Electricity sales and cost of electricity, those are our two biggest items. The spread between those, that margin is about $11 million. And then some of our other expenses, contract services is our largest expense. And this includes our data manager, the PG&E service fees, a lot of costs that are directly tied to our customer base. So as the customer base grows, a lot of these expenses are tethered to it, so they're going to grow as well. Okay, and then you can see towards the bottom, the third line from the bottom is our changes in net position. So that's the increase from the prior year, 3.698 million. Okay. Now, next page is the statement of cash flows. I'm not going to go over that today. Okay. That one can be a little more confusing. I'm sure I would confuse you even more. Okay, so on page 11 is the notes, the financial statements. So the first one is several pages. It's a summary of our accounting policies. Not much of our policies have changed over the last couple of years, so we can skip over that right now. Those are pretty much the same as what was presented in prior year's financial statements. But you can refer to those if you're interested. One note that causes maybe a little bit of confusion is note 3 on page 14, accounts receivable. There's a table there that shows the allowance for uncollectibles netting against our gross accounts receivable. So we know as we bill our customers, a certain percentage of that is not going to be collected. So we don't want to recognize revenue, we don't want to overstate revenue for what we know or estimate to be uncollectible. So we decrease our revenue and decrease our accounts receivable, the amount that shows up on the balance sheet statement and position, by the amount we expect to be uncollectible. So what is possibly confusing here, if you see that in the 2015 column, the allowance is 2.3 million, and the gross accounts receivable is 12.8 million. You might look, that's an 18%. If you were to compare that, that's, you might say, what's going on? Or 18% of your billings uncollectible? No, that's not the right way to look at it. That amount is, the allowance is an accumulation over time from the beginning, from 2010. Okay, we still attempt collections on our customer accounts for several years, and so we don't write them off. We do get collections 3 or 4 years later. So for that purpose, we don't write them off. It's still an accumulating balance, and that gross number, the gross positive number, is also, has that portion built into it. So I don't know, it may be confusing.
That's helpful.
More
That's helpful.
now,
Yeah.
but the point is, that's not a fair percentage to make. We want to look at that net number, that 10.5 million. That's what shows up on the balance sheet, and that's the amount we expect to collect of what we have bid. Okay. So hopefully that clear it up a little bit. The next page, note 5, advances from grantor. I mentioned that a little bit going to the statement of position, and that's just kind of explaining the methodology of how we receive funds in advance, and then we spend them and recognize them on, when we spend eligible expenses. So during the year, fiscal year 2015, we received 1.5 million, and we've been receiving it quarterly, I believe since the beginning of 2014 fiscal year. And we spent a little over $1 million of it and recognized that as revenue during 14-15. And in addition to that, we also had starting in I think January 2015, a gas public purpose program, which is structured a little differently. It's more of a reimbursement type grant where we spend the money first and request reimbursement. So the combination of those two revenues is what's going to show up in the financial statements. Okay, so that's a big one. The debt, we can skip over that. That's a lot of charts there, but they're not relevant anymore. Finally, and probably the biggest note here, note 9 on page 17, commitments and contingencies. I'll just read it real quick, it's pretty short. MCE has entered into multiple power purchase agreements to meet its near and long-term needs. MCE has outstanding non-cancelable power purchase commitments of approximately $886.5 million for energy and related services through October 31, 2041 that have not yet been provided. So that's a big number, right? And so just to put it in some perspective, we have a table down there that breaks out over the next 5 years and 20 years, 21 years after that. So you can see how the next 3 years we have a lot of our energy that we're going to procure already contracted. For instance, 2016, I think we budgeted about $130 million of expenses, of energy expenses. So you can see about 118 million of that has been entered into and contracted into by the end of the year. So some of that maybe still is open position, maybe some of it has been, we've entered into contract after March 31st that might take care of some of that difference. Anyway, so that's a big number and hopefully that puts a little bit of perspective on it. So those are probably the big notes that are more unique to MCE. I went over that pretty fast. I don't have any questions now, but if you
Thank you,
want to
Mike.
read
That
through
was
this,
helpful.
questions later on, that's.
Any questions for Mike at this point? No? Yeah, Larry, please.
Maybe not a question, but a comment, going back to your uncollectibles.
Yeah.
I would think irrespective of how you report it for this purpose, that this board would want to know whether they're doing better or worse on a year-over-year basis.
As far as
As
collection success.
No, in terms of your uncollectibles, because the way this looks now, even if you take the incremental amounts, because you said it's cumulative, on a percentage basis to your revenue, it looks like you're doing worse every year.
Well, it is tied to our actual sales or revenues. So it's a percentage of our revenues. So as our revenues grew from 80 million in 2014 to 100 million in 2015, you're going to have, you'd expect about that increase also in the uncollectible amount.
Yeah.
Now, in addition, before 2000, the end of 2014, we were just, I guess Richard had just come on for a few months. So we had many years of data for Marin, and we were able to kind of estimate what the collection rate is for Marin. And so we've been doing that with Richmond. Now we have about 1.5 years of data. And the collection cycle is long, so it takes many months to really weed out and see how much our collections are in each county. And with the new counties coming on, we're going to do the same thing there. So we have a more cautionary estimate. What we don't want to do is overstate revenue. We want to err on the conservative side as far as accounting goes. So we're going to overestimate an uncollectible rate for counties that we don't have a lot of historical data on. So that would be another reason why, as a percentage, comparing an older year to a newer year, it's a combination of greater revenue, so just the base figure is larger, plus a slightly higher uncollectible percentage for at least a portion of that revenue.
Yeah, no, I understand what you're doing. All I'm saying is that from a comparative basis, if you're going to set a policy, I mean, the nice part about PG&E as a competitor is you can say, okay, well, we don't want these people. you know, because if they're not gonna pay you anyway, then let them not pay someone else. But if you start to profile that word properly, but if you start to identify who these uncollectibles are and whether it's getting better or worse, then you can actually control and reduce that uncollectible.
Yeah, and that's interesting, and probably the customer engagement team could talk about it even more, the process that customers go through when they are delinquent on accounts. There is a point where they will get automatically reverted back to PG&E. So we will nip it in the bud, so to speak, so these accounts won't grow, like an individual who's not paying won't grow and grow and grow and grow. We'll limit that loss, so to speak. And then we're just trying to collect on that amount. So there are some methods to taking care of what you mentioned.
Yeah, and one point of clarification, just because this, our business model is a little different than a traditional business model in that the billing, the opportunity for folks to pay stays open for a very long time. And the requirement by statute is that charges that come in to PG&E apply to first charges first. And so if a customer is delinquent 6 months and we just started serving them, we're not gonna see that delinquency hit for about 6 months. And then it could be, you know, even if we've sent them back to PG&E 3 months later, it might be 6 more months or even 12 months before the charges that come in are finally applied to the charges that we had on their bill. So that's why we do need to keep that window open for a long time. But I think you're making a great comment about tracking and how we can communicate that
Yeah,
clearly.
and if you also have a track record of their amounts in arrears going into it, maybe you don't take them on to begin with.
Unfortunately, PG's not willing to provide that information to us. We did ask.
Okay.
Great. Any other questions of Mike at this point? Yeah, thank you.
I have a
Oh,
question.
yeah, Emmett.
Who are the companies providing you with all the financial information?
The actual financial.
Yeah, the numbers that you're,
Well, there's, obviously, there is two distinct financial numbers. There are the operating expenses that get run through, we run them all internally, okay? And then there is the customer data. So that gets processed by our data manager, Noble Energy Americas. It's our largest contracted service. They track the billing, they run the volume numbers, assign the rates, send that data over to PG&E, so they can then send it out to a customer, and then they communicate back with PG&E the amounts that were collected. They apply the collections by each customer account, and it's a massive database that we sort through every month, and even more.
so Noble provides that to you?
Noble provides that, yes.
Okay. What about on the procurement side? Who provides that part of it?
Well, the procurement side, a lot of it are estimates and projections for the future. PEA handles that.
I mean, who's adding up who are the companies adding up all the bills and saying, it came to $97 million?
We are, the accounting team are.
Accounting.
The procurement team will go through every invoice, match it, validate it, make sure it agrees to the contracted amounts, the volumes agree to CAISO numbers, and so on. There's a pretty large process there, and once it gets vetted and approved, it goes through yet another approval process that will follow the actual cash, the written check to go out. And that's all done internally. Once we get our invoice, energy providers invoice us every month.
Okay.
Anything else? Okay, great. Mike, do you have more that you were going to present to us, or are we good?
I think I'm good.
You think you're good? Thank you very much. Your explanations were really helpful. Thank you for that report. Okay, so let's move on to item 6, which is a resolution approving a non-revolving credit agreement with River City Bank. John, this is sharing your bailiwick.
I have the privilege of presenting this one. So staff has negotiated a credit facility, a non-revolving line of credit with River City Bank to provide up to $15 million in financing for the purposes of providing collateral to MCE's suppliers, counterparties, for incremental power purchases. So the power purchases that are being contemplated would be for future delivery for the period after the agreement with Shell Energy North America terminates. So that would be, that terminates at the end of 2017. So the procurement team will be starting to contract for power beginning in 2018, 2019. As we move off of the current structure with Shell, what is standard in the industry is that the buyer needs to post collateral to just back its financial obligations, back its commitments to pay for the power. And what's typical is a letter of credit issued by a investment grade or highly rated financial institution. So that's a typical. We can also post cash. The credit facility, oh, by the way, I should say the $15 million will cover our anticipated needs for the next 2 to 3 years, the anticipated collateral needs for forward power purchasing. The credit facility that we've negotiated with River City is it provides for MCE to either draw cash, so similar to kind of a traditional credit line, or have letters of credit issued to support MCE's power purchases. It's generally more efficient to provide letters of credit than cash, but we do have that option if circumstances suggest that would be a more effective way of providing the collateral. Nice feature of this deal is that MCE has the discretion to request that the letters of credit be issued by either Union Bank, which is a fairly large A+ rated bank, or by River City Bank, which is a smaller regional bank. If the letters of credit are issued by River City Bank, we'd get a discount. We'd pay lower fees. We expect the majority of the letters are going to be issued through Union Bank, just because that's going to be a more widely accepted form of credit than a letter of credit issued through River City. But we do have that option, so we can try as we negotiate with our suppliers. If they'll accept River City's letter, we'll have a savings on the letter of credit for this. The term of the credit facility is 1 year, and any letters of credit issued under the credit facility will also be 1 year with an automatic renewal for up to 5 years. So they'll automatically renew unless the issuer provides a notice to terminate the letter. And the termination notice is 120 days, which is pretty, it's enough time to give us the ability to replace with a different form of collateral, whether it's cash or trying to arrange a different letter. Any cash draws under the line, or if the letter of credit was actually drawn by the beneficiary, so in other words, that would happen if MCE didn't pay the supplier could draw on the letter of credit. If that were to happen, this would convert to a note, and MCE would have the option to pay that over a 5-year term. So we can term out either cash draws or any drawn letters of credit over a 5-year period. So that's a nice feature of this credit facility. The fees, the primary fees are 0.25% applicable to the entire 15 million aggregate credit limit. And then for any letters of credit that are actually issued, it would be 1.25% if issued by Union, and 1% if issued by River City. So while we don't expect to use the entire 15 million this year, we'll probably use about a third of that. But if we were to use the entire 15 million, then the fees would be about $225,000 a year. This fiscal year, we expect the fees would be about $60,000 or no more than $60,000. Some of the terms and conditions, one of the more significant ones is that as collateral for the credit line, MCE will need to establish a debt service reserve fund and provide River City a security interest in that fund. And that will be in an amount of $1.657 million. And that equates to basically 6 months of debt service. If you assume that the entire $15 million were termed out over 5 years, what would be 6 months worth of the debt service payments? That's the amount. That's how the reserve fund was established. So we'll need to establish that account with the bank before we issue the first letter of credit. So this the negotiation of this instrument is really taking place over the last several months. We started the process in March. We we engaged in discussions with 3 different banks. We also had support from MCE's financial consultant, which is Public Financial Management, and through this process, engaged the Finance Ad Hoc Committee as well as the Executive Committee. So we're confident that the fees as well as the terms of this credit facility are competitive, and will meet the agency's needs going forward for collateral. So the recommendation is to adopt the resolution that would approve the agreement with the River City Bank. The agreement itself was provided in the board packet. There have been some, I would say, non-substantive changes, really just clarifying changes. So the actual agreement will be a little bit different than what's in the board packet, but there's none of the commercial terms or anything significant has changed, just really clean up stuff. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, great, please.
Does the resolution need to authorize establishing this debt fund?
Do we have a copy of that? I don't, that's a good question.
Yeah, no, I think the resolution as it's currently worded is adequate for what is needed at this point.
Questions or other questions or comments from the board? Yes, Peter.
Yes, thank you. There we go. Couple questions. If the letter of credit converts to a note, is the rate set at a predetermined interest rate? And so that would then become some kind of a note?
Correct.
And has that interest rate been determined?
It is, and it's a floating rate, so it's LIBOR plus a margin. That's specified in the agreement, yes.
Okay, and then the debt service reserve fund, where would that be kept?
That will be held at River City Bank.
And then does that draw interest for MCE while it's in that account?
Correct. So it could be put in a CD, in an interest-bearing account. Right.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions or comments? Do we have a public that would like to comment on this matter? Seeing none. All right, anything else? I'll entertain a motion to approve. Yep, Brad, thank you.
Second.
All right, all in favor? Aye. Any opposition? Any abstentions? Very good. All right, so next item on our agenda, thank you, John. Next item on our agenda is the rate tariff schedule for E19 and E20 option R, whew, which is a bit inscrutable on its face, but I know we're going to have an explanation. All right.
Okay. Give me one more time here tonight.
Yeah, good.
So what this is, it's what's being termed is a solar-friendly rate option. And so the background is that PG&E recently introduced a variant to its large commercial and industrial schedules, so what they call the E19 and the E20 schedules. That is more beneficial to customers that have on-site solar photovoltaic systems. We've evaluated the new PG&E rate options, and we're recommending that MCE adopt a similar option R variant for its large commercial and industrial rate schedules. Kind of getting into the nuts and bolts of this, the standard commercial rate schedules have basically 2 types of charges. There's a per kilowatt hour energy charge, so however many kilowatt hours you use, you pay $1 per kilowatt hour charge. That's an energy charge. And then there is also a per kW demand charge. So depending, the demand charge is applied to the highest demand during any 15-minute interval during the month. So if you think, if you are a customer of solar and you're normally self-producing most of your energy, but then we had a rainy day and you didn't get any production that day, your demand would spike, and the demand charge would apply to that highest peak that occurred during the month, even though normally you don't use much, right? So that's the idea that the demand charges are not particularly solar friendly, so the option R variant will eliminate the demand charge and instead have higher energy charges. So in theory it's revenue neutral. So you eliminate the demand charge, but then the on-peak and the partial peak energy charges are higher to essentially recover the same amount of money. In practice, it probably will not be revenue neutral because it's likely that only the customers that will benefit from this option will elect to take it. So we conducted an analysis, and we estimate that we'd see a revenue loss of about $35,000 this fiscal year if this option were to be offered. Keep in context, though, that if we don't offer it, these customers may have a better deal with PG&E, so we might lose that revenue as well in that scenario. So the eligibility under this, we would just follow the PG&E's eligibility guidelines. So if they are on the option R schedule for delivery charges, they would automatically qualify for MCE's option R, so we wouldn't have to do any special kind of eligibility tracking. But just for information, customers will be eligible if at least 15% of their consumption is met with on-site photovoltaic. Doesn't apply to other on-site renewable technologies, just PV. So that's kind of it, and the recommendation is to adopt the option R variant rates that are set forth in the staff report.
And thank you, John. Any questions or comments from the board? Saying none. Anything from the public? Saying none. Someone like to move to approve? Gary, did you have a question or comment?
Follow-up question is,
Yeah.
is there anything, I understand that this is because of the demand charges, they're not friendly to solar, but is there, since the solar rate structure is changing dramatically and the premium time will be shifting from 4 to 9, that's not very friendly to solar either. Is there a chance of doing anything for the residential customers that have installed solar?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. We're going to have to grapple with that because when Jeremy covered
Exactly.
his issue about some of the schedules that PG&E maintains that are real popular with residential solar, we have the same schedule, right? E7, for instance, and that's going away at the end of this year. So we're going to have to figure out what we're going to do with customers on that schedule. And PG&E is going to introduce this new ETOU, so we'll probably want to introduce something similar. So we aren't quite there yet, but that's something that we're going to have to be talking about over the next couple of months before the end of the year. Is what our residential time of use rates are going to look like. It's a little bit of a you want to be solar friendly, but at the same time you can only subsidize so much. So if because there's so much solar on the system, the true peak is not during those daylight hours. At some point, it just becomes a massive subsidy to credit them at these super high peak rates. So to some extent, the rates need to reflect cost of service, and as the cost of the system changes, time of use periods change. I think it's appropriate that that we change our rates as well. But I think that's the type of discussion we would typically have in the early part of the year, before we head into setting rates for the fiscal year. I think this year, because of the changes that are happening with PG&E, we're going to have to have some of those discussions a little bit sooner, right? So.
Well, perhaps if you can do something for the people that have already invested in the solar and not necessarily add those incentives in the future to encourage more people to go to solar.
Yeah.
That would be one way to deal with that.
Yeah, Peter.
I was curious how many customers would have this COM. How many customers currently have COM 19 or 20 within MCE?
Yeah, that's one question. Are you interested in the ones that would be eligible for this option R, or just?
Yeah.
We only see less than 10 at present.
I'm curious too. You said that you estimated there might be about $35,000 revenue loss, and I'm wondering what the total revenue these customers produce for MCE that could be lost if they say switch over to PG&E to take advantage of that. I'm wondering if you have a sense of how much revenue they bring in.
Right. So no, that's a great question, and we did that analysis, and I don't have the figures in my mind or in front of me, but I'll answer it that the revenue loss would be greater than the $35,000 that we're talking about. So if we lost these customers altogether, it's not just the revenue, it's the surplus of revenue over cost, really, that is the primary issue, because that amount contributes to our fixed costs and helps reduce rates overall. If we lose that, all else being equal, then we either have less reserves or we have to slightly adjust rates. So the margins that those customers provide as the MC customer are going to be greater than 35,000. I'm sorry, I don't have the exact numbers, but that's certain.
But you think it's cost effective to lose a little bit of revenue to make sure that we retain those large customers?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Getting any of those 10 customers approaching us for this proposal, or are we just reacting more to marry what PG&E is doing?
Yeah, see, I don't do a lot of the direct customer interaction.
I can comment on that. We did get inquiries from at least 2 of the 10 customers about this rate, and we expect that the others were looking at it as well. So that was part of the impetus for looking at this.
Anything else? All right, I'd entertain a motion to approve this new rate tariff schedule for E19 and E20 option R.
I'll move that we adopt the proposed COM 19R and COM 20R rates.
Have a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? That's approved, great. So our next item, which was a discussion regarding potential petition regarding our PCIA charges, has been deferred. Dawn will come back on that, as you indicated earlier, when we have more information. And so now we're on to item 9, which are new MCE staff positions. Good evening, Katie.
Hi, good evening. Katie Guard, Human Resources Coordinator. We've been talking a lot about growth tonight, so I'm here to talk about more growth, and that is addition of 2 new positions, 2 different unique positions. One is in the energy efficiency area, which, as you all know, and we'll hear more when Becky makes her presentation, that there's a lot of growth in energy efficiency offerings, and we find a need for a mid-management position, work on contracts and budgets, as well as supervision in that area. The salary that's recommended is at the level of other mid-management positions, and that's due to the difficulty that we have in the market because we're so unique, our positions are so unique, that there's not a lot of comparables. So the recommendation is that it be at the level of other mid-management positions. The other position is a finance and project manager, and that is to assist Dawn, Chief Executive Officer, in particularly substantive tasks in the areas of finance and business projects. An example project that we did was the whole analysis and review of our retirement system, which is moving forward. And it's those kind of projects that take hours and hours of time that that Dawn needs assistance for someone to make recommendations in that area. The salary for that is recommended as senior management level below the director level, and that's due to the criticality of the functions, as well as to the scope of the responsibility and the amount of experience required for that. Any questions?
Hey, Katie, any questions from the board?
Yeah.
Yeah, Greg, yes.
Where does it fit in the org chart that's in the business plan?
So the positions that we're looking at don't necessarily translate to the sort of function that's described in the business plan. The program managers would likely take on some of the SPOC positions. We also may look at some of the SPOCs being external contract positions, so the program managers would be in a position of overseeing the function of the contractors. So it's sort of like it's not a direct correlation in that sense.
So because this is the 2017 plan, you're not quite there yet. It's a interim type of hire?
And also more so because some of the positions that are described here are function related rather than like the program title. So when we talk about a single point of contact, that may or may not actually be a program manager position. The program manager may also oversee contracts that are the single point of contact.
Got it. Okay.
Any other questions? All right, seeing none, would someone like to move to approve?
Also move, do we need to make 2 motions, or can this be done in one?
I think we can do one for both. Yeah.
I'll move that we approve 2 job descriptions, one for the energy efficiency program manager with the enumerated salary range, and secondly, for the job description for the finance and project manager with the other enumerated salary range.
Thank you. Thanks very much. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? That's approved. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you.
All right, now we're moving on to energy efficiency, and I'm cautiously optimistic that this may be our last presentation, as much as we love being in your world, Becky.
Do you need to learn it? Oh, sorry, I don't know how to do this. While we're pulling the presentation up, in classic fashion, I make Darlene's life as hard as I possibly can by doing everything scraping under the wire. So she's very graciously pulling this up for me. Tonight, we have on the agenda for the energy efficiency update to seek approval of the implementation plans that we've been developing and vetting with the public over the course of the last several months. So to skip into the overview, we plan to just give a brief update on the 2015 program results. I'd like to remind you again that we are including now reports out on monthly results that are in your board packets, and additionally we have added, at the suggestion of some public comment, a position on our webpage where we include our monthly program results as well. We have already been reporting on a quarterly and monthly basis to the CPUC. That information has always been publicly available, but it's not always easily interpreted. It often is in claims data, refers to kilowatt hours and therms, things that are not easily understood. So for the past 6 to 8 months, we've actually been preparing a more user-friendly, pretty version with some more of the qualitative metrics, such as the number of homes that we've audited. When I say qualitative, I mean rather than just the energy savings per light bulb kind of information. So we'll look at that again. Also, I plan to just give a quick update on what the implementation plans are and talk a little bit about the process to getting here tonight. And then we can talk a little bit about the CPUC proposed decision and the next steps that we're looking at for the actual filing of our application. All right, so I took us through this slide, so I'll just take us right to the program results for 2015. And again, this is a little hard to read. Usually what I do is I go through program by program, but in the interest of moving on to the implementation plans tonight, I thought I would just throw up this one slide. And as a refresher, this is also posted on our website on the Energy Efficiency Program page for MCE, so you can always take a look there. Generally, what makes me just warm and fuzzy when I look at this slide is just the ramp up. What we've really been able to demonstrate since we've launched these programs is a really dramatic increase in the savings of our program. What I'm also thrilled to announce today is that due in large part to the hard work of Megan over here on the multifamily, we are actually in a position of being oversubscribed on our multifamily program. So we've had to actually establish a wait list. And if the projections hold true with the number of folks we have in our pipeline and the rebate reservations we anticipate coming through, we may also be oversubscribed through 2016. Wow. So we're in problem-solving mode, trying to shift funds across programs, get them into that category, and see if we can get even more traction in that program. We're on track in small commercial, so that's great as well. And then the single-family program, again, those are savings that are based on sending out the mailers, and so they're very consistent and predictable. Whenever we send out the mailers, we see, by comparing the energy usage of people who are receiving them to a treatment group of people who are not receiving them, about a 2% reduction in usage just from folks getting those mailers. So those are persistent in terms of they're reliable in terms of we know that we see those reductions, but they actually aren't persistent in terms of they continue after the mailers go out. So that's just a function of the type of program that it is. In addition, again, very happy to point out some of the numbers. We now at this point have provided energy saving equipment to almost 1,000 units throughout our service territory. We also have done over 137 projects for the small commercial sector. Again, these numbers are all as of July, so they continue to grow on a monthly basis. And we expect a huge uptick in these figures by the end of this year due to the multifamily program activity. So very exciting news all around the board in energy efficiency. Moving into the implementation plans, in your board packet you have the opportunity to go access many pages worth of implementation plans. We provided in the board packet not only the final versions of the implementation plans for your review, but we also provided the original versions that were sent out for public comment with track changes to show what we've done to incorporate the public comment that we've received so far. Those of you who have the beautiful business plan in front of you, which should be each of the board members, we also include a quick summary in the appendices. After the letters of support that we've been able to receive for the business plan, we have also a little bit about the public comment. So really quickly and easily on the very last page of the business plan is a summary of the public comment that we've received to date. Not all of that is on the implementation plan. Some is on the business plan or some is on general questions, but a lot of it was really focused on the implementation plans. as we suspected, a lot of the community engagement that we've had to date has been really interest in the detail associated with implementation strategy. So that's what we saw when we sent them out for public input. So the implementation plans themselves are structured to provide the detail that is not existing by design in the business plan. The business plan document is supposed to be a high-level strategy, does not include the information that is sector-specific, but should include information that would be redundant across each of the sectors. For example, our customer-oriented approach and our desire to use a customer relationship management to track our relationship with customers over time. That's the level of information that's in the business plan. The implementation plans, however, get into a lot more detail. We include market characterization. We look at building and energy characteristics for folks within our service territory, key market actors and forces that impact energy usage, that impact the way we interact with buildings. An example of this would be for the commercial building sector, the non-residential benchmarking law that the California Energy Commission has put out. This is a force which influences the way commercial building owners interact with energy efficiency, and it's a way that we can interact with those commercial building owners to encourage them to do energy efficiency upgrades. So the implementation plans articulate some of that vision that show that we have an understanding of our local market and talk about how we actually plan on intervening in that market to get folks to do energy efficiency upgrades. They also talk about specific strategies. The choice of the word strategy is by intention. We're trying to merge away from discrete siloed programs within each sector, but really have a more consolidated approach that allows for some flexibility within implementation. We think that's important. What we see, for example, in the investor and utility portfolios is somewhere on the order of 160 programs, and that's extremely difficult for any single customer to navigate. And when a customer is confronted with that many options, sometimes they just freeze up and don't do anything. So our approach is to rather have a single point of contact who has a variety of strategies at their disposal that they can combine, that they can direct customers to, but not discrete programs that are competing against each other within one customer sector. Another thing that we talk about, quality assurance, quality control, which also leads into how we measure the program success. We talk about the quantitative metrics that we look at. Each of the implementation plans in the last page has a list of the metrics that we plan on tracking and using over time to make sure that we're on track to meeting our proposed targets. Things include participation rate, energy savings level. We also have a plan to use the actual smart meter data to monitor real-time impacts. This may seem crazy, but most of the energy savings claims that we do with the state of California are deemed, meaning when you replace a light bulb, they estimate that it's going to achieve this many kilowatt hours over the other light bulb that you put in its place. But very little actual site-by-site specific tracking is done at the state level. So we would like to actually build on the use of smart meter data now that we're finally starting to get a flow of data from the utility so that we can see what the real-time impacts are, and particularly in performance-based projects, understand if things are not working out the way we thought they would so we can follow up with the customer and provide a better customer experience. We think that's going to be a really important aspect of the program. There's also qualitative metrics. Those are built in through the single point of contact. We have an opportunity to have customer surveys and also contractor surveys. Contractors will and continue to be a very important part of this program since they are often the ones interacting with the customers at the point of a major project being considered. I don't need to belabor this a lot. Also, many of the metrics vary by program type, but included in your board packet, we actually pulled out a list of all of the metrics that are in each of the implementation plans so you have a quick look at the types of things that we're planning on tracking over time. A little bit about the actual process for the implementation plan review. We release them between the 10th and 21st of July on our website. We also sent out information on our energy efficiency listserv. We'll go in just a second over all of the public comment that we've done to date, but at each workshop we've allowed people to sign up for an actual EE listserv, where if they have interest in energy efficiency, they get information like this right away, and that's proved to be a really good form of communication with the more EE-focused folks in our community. Deadline for public comment was July 31st. We also allowed people the opportunity to show up to TechCom and XCom in early August to provide feedback at that point. We did have a few participants who showed up and provided some comment there. And then the August 3rd and August 5th TechCom again were an opportunity for folks to show up, and the revised implementation plans reflecting the comment we've received are in your board packet. One of the things I wanted to just show, because I'm so exhausted and so happy to be here tonight, is the road it has taken us to get here. We had a significant amount of review, both in the community and with the board. Between May of 2014 and January of 2015, we were out on the streets asking people how energy efficiency figured into their lives, what mattered to them, and that was the crucial input that we used to shape the plans before us today. Overall, we had exposure to more than 88 members of our community at these different workshops who helped lend their voices to what they thought was important in the programs. Additionally, this slide almost goes off the edge of the presentation, and it would if I included tonight's board. This is the amount of times that we have brought this plan and the implementation plans before the board as well. So a lot of activity. I understand why you're ready for this to be the last meeting on these plans. One of the things that we haven't shown you before that I was really excited about is the actual greenhouse gas emissions that we're anticipating to save from these programs. This is an output from the E3 calculator. Again, that's the calculator that's used to calculate the cost effectiveness for the CPUC. And this actually shows the electricity purchases, the greenhouse gas emissions associated with that aspect of the business, and compares it to what we're accomplishing with energy efficiency. And I think it's also worth noting that our budget is about 10% of the overall MCE revenue budget. And again, this would be the 2016 proposed budget. So I think it's just an interesting way to look at how these programs are contributing to the overall mission here in the community in order to achieve greenhouse gas mitigation. This is the last slide that I have for you, and I just wanted to note that the proposed decision that we were anticipating from the Public Utilities Commission has finally come out. It came out on Tuesday, and that is the proposed decision that actually invites, or it doesn't invite applications yet, but it does provide the structure and format for applications. As a refresher, we were jumping the gun and putting ours together early for a number of factors, which I can go into, but now we have an actual template to look at and compare to what we have together. And overall, I'm very encouraged with how much in alignment we are. There are one or two very small tweaks that could be made to the business plan that primarily discuss program coordination with other programs, but by and large, the business plan is exactly on point with the level of detail and type of information that they were looking to see. So we're very encouraged by that. The implementation plans, I'm still reading through the detailed template to see what compares to ours. And overall, again, there I'm very encouraged. We had a lot of the involvement with the joint stakeholders who were proposing the structure of the filing so that we had an early view to what we thought might be anticipated. So that served us very well in the end, that involvement at the state level. We will be spending some time over the next several days doing that thorough final review, discussing whether or not we think we need to make any changes to the implementation plan, but overall I think we're in pretty good shape. So the next step would be to actually file motion for consideration with the CPUC. And again, as a refresher, what we anticipated and what we are seeing echoed in the decision is that the business plan itself would be the formal document that the commission votes on. The implementation plans are not actually voted on by the commission, but are posted on a website for the commission to review and can be updated on a real-time basis at any time by the program administrators. So just so there's some understanding about what that process is there. And with that, I would be happy to answer any questions.
So Becky, I want to thank you for putting this summary of metrics to track the program in our packet. That's really helpful. As you know, in our various meetings, some of us were struggling to remember that those metrics were at the back of each program, so it's really helpful to have them all in one place. And I think that the slides you showed tonight really demonstrate both the significance of this program and the implementation plan and the incredible amount of work that's gone into it by your team. And I'm just glad to see that you're still standing.
Question. Gary Lyon. Is it going to be a real advantage to be out there first?
We think so. There's a few reasons for that. The first and foremost is that when we initially launched our program proposal with the CPUC, we were directed to avoid duplication of existing IOU programs. Since then, we've been told that we have to achieve the same cost effectiveness ratio as the IOU programs that have been operating for over 20 years in the service territory and have access to statewide rebate programs and high air conditioning loads such as the San Joaquin Valley. So because of the fact that we, number one, need to achieve that higher cost effectiveness ratio. And number two, because we have to do that with 88% of our customers being single family residential, and with the majority of that being in a coastal temperate climate, we really need to be able to stake the claim on the more cost-effective programs within our service territory to achieve the mandates of the CPUC. So that's the primary reason that we're actually stepping out a little early. Secondly, we also have some policy guidance for doing that. The CCA decision that directs how how CCAs can do EE was passed mid-cycle for us. We were already in the middle of administering our programs. So in order to come into compliance with that decision in general, we think there's an opportunity for us to put our application in at this point, being the third year of our programs. It sort of falls in line with the decision on CCAs and energy efficiency as well.
Okay.
Any questions, comments? Seeing none, I think someone should just jump forward to have a motion to approve the program implementation plan. Who wants to move? Oh, you're doing a good
Sure,
job.
I will move to approve the project implementation plan.
And to file?
And you're second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Becky?
No,
Watch out.
I'm registering opposition.
You're
I
registering
wrote a
opposition.
comment that's put in there, yeah.
Okay.
And
all
I've
right.
spoken about a TechCom meeting.
And you're not feeling more comfortable, you're still where you are.
Look, I'm on the team. I hope it all works, but I wouldn't have gone down this road. I would have gone down more of the niche road rather than trying to do everything for every person. And I think it's taking on a lot, and I'd like to see the flexibility and the nimbleness and the innovation that MCE has always brought to the table, brought to something that's more focused and more niche-oriented, rather than replicating what all the other programs are doing out there, in my opinion.
Thank you, Emma. Well, your input's been helpful in the whole process. All right, so, all but one. But I think we're all really impressed by the amount of work that's gone into it. So,
Thank you.
all right. We're good. Okay, so, next on our agenda is our communications update.
All right, good evening. Hello, directors. I'm Jamie Tuckey, just for the record. And I'm here tonight to talk to you about what we've been up to at MCE with our communities and give you an update on our customer base and our activities. I'm sure you've noticed, though, before I get into that it's cooled off quite a bit today and yesterday, but I'm imagining that over the last couple of weeks, you all have been sweating in this heat wave with the rest of us, like this young child here trying to stay cool in front of her fan. So before I get started in my presentation, I wanted to just take an opportunity to remind you that now is a great time in the summer heat to exercise your energy efficient habits, to keep yourself cool and comfortable at home and at work, and also to keep your bills low. I know it's the end of the night, but does anyone know what your thermostat is supposed to be set to when it's hot outside to be most efficient and comfortable? We'll have a guess.
78?
It's between 75 and 78 degrees, so good job. Health permitting, so that's just something to keep in mind if you want to check your thermostats if it starts to heat up again. Remember to keep your shades down during the day and pay attention to the temperature as it changes later in the afternoon so that you can turn off your AC and open your windows and work with nature to stay cool and be as efficient as possible. So that's it for my energy efficiency tip of the night. Becky's been training me. Anyway, despite the heat, our team's been really busy out in the community, gallivanting around, attending community events and meetings and doing farmers markets. We were in Fairfax last night at a farmers market. That went really well. And you'll see in your board packet a list of the events that we've participated in to date this year. We've actually participated in more than 170 events so far in 2015, so that's just this year. We've been very busy. It's twice as many events as we had participated in at the same time last year. These events are really an excellent opportunity for us to go out into the community, have direct conversations with people, and educate our communities about the choices they have available to them, and generally create awareness about MCE programs. So, of course, in addition to tracking all of the events that we're attending, we also track our overall community participation. And what's been really wonderful to see over the last several months is that our customer base is actually growing and increasing. And that is separate from the addition of the new communities that we added this year, Napa, El Cerrito, Benicia, and San Pablo. So in addition to the growth from those communities, our customer base has also grown, and that's because customers who have previously chosen to opt out of MCE are now deciding to give it a try, and they're enrolling in either our light green or our deep green program. That's also because of new accounts being opened up where there was no electric service before, so maybe new buildings, new apartments, and things of that nature. So today we're serving over 170,000 accounts and more than 3,200 deep green customers. The deep green customers represent about 2% of our overall customer base today. I also wanted to give you all an update about the participation rates that we're seeing in the communities who joined MCE this year. So this chart shows you the percentage of customers that have chosen to get their electric service from MCE. So you can see in unincorporated Napa County, the customer base, 90% of them have enrolled in MCE, and about 1% of those customers have chosen deep green. In San Pablo, 91% have enrolled, a little under 1% are enrolled in deep green. El Cerrito also has a 90% participation rate, and as Director Lyman said earlier, they have a huge deep green enrollment rate, which has been so impressive. We're really excited about it, 5%, the highest of all of our communities. And Benicia as well, they're at a 79% participation rate and 2% deep green rate. Our Marin communities and our the city of Richmond, we also track that as well, and the participation rate between Marin and Richmond is about 20%. One of the other things I wanted to let you all know about is an advocacy training workshop that we have planned for September. So as you all know, we work a lot with community organizations throughout the service area, and our relationships with them have been instrumental in growing our deep green customer base and general understanding about our program. Notably, we've been working with the Main Street Moms, the Fairfax Climate Action Committee, the San Anselmo Quality of Life Commission, and the Marin Conservation League to develop this training workshop. We decided to host this workshop at the request of the advocates so that they would have an opportunity to come together and spend a day at our offices where they could network amongst each other and find out which other community groups are interested in advocating and supporting MCE. This is not just in Marin, but also in Richmond and all of the new communities that we're serving. An opportunity to find out how they can support each other's work and how MCE can support them and make sure that we're providing them with all of the resources that they need. An opportunity to inspire each other, inform and learn and interact so that they can be the best advocates possible. So we are holding pretty much an all-day workshop on the 22nd, and it'll be here at our offices. We've also worked with the different community groups to determine what they want to do at the workshop. So these are the items that they wanted to have on the agenda. So we'll be discussing the basics about community choice aggregation and MCE, how it works. We'll be talking about power resources and the electric grid, so that's sort of an educational time, or we'll be talking about how different renewable energy sources work, how renewable compares to traditional fossil fuels, how the electric grid works. We'll be talking about MCE procurement principles and policies, details about deep green, local soul, and our energy efficiency program, and we'll be saving the last part of the day for the group to brainstorm about what types of campaigns and efforts they want to do to continue advocating for MCE and what that means in real life and for their community groups. So we're really excited about that training workshop. We'll be videotaping that as well so that other groups can learn from it if they're not able to attend.
Yeah, please do. I want to comment on something too.
Yeah, what's the process for selecting advocates? Do they self-select themselves? Do they just call you up and say, I hear about this training? What's the...
Yeah, well, we have a relationship with tons of community groups throughout our service area. A large part of that happened organically. when we roll out into new communities and they learn about us and their values align with ours. So sometimes it's community groups and organizations, sometimes it's individuals who have a passion for sustainability and renewable energy. They'll reach out to us and we work with the advocates. So we have a long history of several years dating back probably well before we ever started service. In the early 2000s, where we worked with people from the community grassroots organizations to find out what was important to them and even help us shape our program. For this specific, well, I should also say, for example, for El Cerrito, we worked with city staff to help identify like what are all the community groups in the city of El Cerrito and how can we reach out to them, and we reached out to all of them. And another example is creating our community leader advisory groups, where we asked residents and individuals from within the community to join us and meet with us regularly to help inform our outreach efforts. For this particular training, we are inviting all of our networks and asking them to pass it out to their networks as well, and then we're taking RSVPs because we do have a maximum occupancy in this room of 49, but I would be happy to send the invitation to any of you if you would like to pass it along to people that you think might also be interested.
So Jamie, it strikes me, I think my microphone's not working, but it strikes me that this kind of an advocate training workshop might really be of interest to, most of our high schools have environmental studies programs, and our Marin Youth Commission has a group, a sort of a subcommittee on environmental issues, and I think that those young people would probably be interested in sending at least one or a couple representatives to participate in this. If you can fit them in the room, I think it'd be great. Or ultimately, obviously, share the video. But I think particularly our youth commissioners would be really excited about participating.
That sounds really fun. I think that our advocates would enjoy having students as well to interact with. So we want it to be a really interactive day. That sounds like a great idea. So we'll look into that.
Great.
You might also know that I believe it's the Marin Drake. Is it Drake High School? Mm-hmm. We have an intern who started with us, and she's doing amazing work. I'm sorry, what?
It's Terra Linda's School of Environmental Leadership.
Fantastic.
Okay.
Yeah, these high school students are not to be underestimated.
Oh my gosh, I'm so impressed. I'm thoroughly impressed, actually.
Absolutely.
And she's going to be working with us for the entire year, and she's supporting the energy efficiency team, and so
That's
we're really
nice.
happy to be engaging youth whenever we can.
That's great.
Yeah.
Question?
Yeah.
Are you reaching out, Alan Schwartzman, are you reaching out to all the school districts in our jurisdictions to try and see if you can get some other youth from other areas to come?
For the advocacy training?
Yeah, for that, yeah.
I will do that. This is actually the first, we didn't have that idea ourselves, but
Well,
I love the idea.
Just kind of spurred it when you're talking about
Yeah,
locally,
thank you, Alan. I was
because I
looking
know
at
there's
little
people in
Marin
Venetia,
Center.
there's some of those kids, they'll be here.
Okay, that sounds great.
I think so.
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear it.
Maybe you do a separate youth advocates
Yeah, it might be
training.
fun to do just
Yeah.
a youth day.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
That'd be great.
Well, thank you for the suggestion. It's a great one. Anything else on the advocacy training? All right. Next thing I wanted to talk about is our advertising campaign. So also in your board packet, if you had a chance to look through it, you would have seen an advertising plan that details what we'll be doing over the next several months to promote MCE. This is, of course, beyond being out in the community and doing events and meetings. The goal of our advertising campaign is to increase brand awareness, educate our community about the options that they have and how MCE works, and ultimately increase customer participation in light green, deep green, local soul when it becomes available, and our energy efficiency programs. So we're utilizing several venues to do this. The first that I'll talk about is outdoor advertising. We have booked posters in El Cerrito and Richmond BART stations. We have bus sides on Marin Transit, so Golden Gate Transit. There are bus sides with our advertisements. We have ads in the Larkspur Ferry Shelter and inside the ferries themselves. We've booked ads for when people are taking the ferry from Marin to go to the Giants Stadium as well, so that should be a great opportunity. And also billboards in Napa, El Cerrito, Richmond, Venetia, and also San Pablo. So we're really excited about those. You guys will probably start seeing those when you're out and about. I know earlier this week I saw some buses driving by with our ads, so that was fun to see. We also have advertisements running on well, actually 4 local radio stations, 2 in Napa County, the Vine, and also Kavon, as well as 2 radio stations in West Marin. That's Point Reyes and Bolinas. So we'll have those radio ads running as well. We've also got online digital ads, so those are geographically targeted ads, so they pinpoint computers that are within our service area. We have static ads, so they'll just show up on any particular website that you might be browsing. We also have video ads, so if you're a YouTube user, sometimes you'll see advertisements or commercials before the video that you're watching will play, so we have those as well as videos on non-video specific websites, so like news websites, there can be videos as well. And then a new component that we haven't done before for online advertising is sponsored articles. So we actually draft articles that have content related to renewable energy, sustainability, and those will be included on the Marin IJ and Contra Costa Times websites, and they'll link back to our sites. And we have 2 articles a month, and we change those out at least once a month, and that's a 12-year campaign. I'm sorry, 12-month campaign. 12 years off. Let's see. I don't know why those aren't showing up, but for social and earned media, this is another option. For social and earned media, we are using Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, as well as our e-newsletters. We've got about 5,000 people who have signed up for our e-newsletters to get monthly updates about our programs. So we're using those as well, and including content that complements our advertising campaign. We also have publicity, which is a part of earned media. So that's when there are newspaper articles or radio interviews about our programs. So that's called earned media. You guys might have heard on KQED yesterday, Dawn was interviewed, and they were talking about the Solar One project that's going to be built in Richmond. So that's an example of earned media. In the packet that you all received, there were also examples of several of our ads. So I'm going to show you a sampling of them. It's not all of the ads, but it gives you an idea of the look and feel and the message that we are getting across. So here's one of the ads where we're talking about savings that we are able to provide to our customers. Another is about the local renewal projects that are being built in our service area. This one is about the benefit and the value, the why behind choosing renewable energy. And another one specifically highlighting deep green, 100% renewable. This is another ad that is educating our customer base about the fact that we support California jobs. This is an ad that's creating brand awareness. This one is going in the El Cerrito BART station. It says, "El Cerrito, you're looking bright. It must be that clean energy you switched to." And then a few more ads. These are all about deep green 100% renewable energy. And the one on the bottom right is about our local solar product. So, any questions?
Questions?
Great.
Well, super. Thanks, Jamie. Good. Brad.
If you come up with a stable of letters to the editor, that you could ship to, I would be happy to pick one every once in a while to put in our paper.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Leslie.
Jamie, what about movie theaters, the captive audience?
Yeah, we have not booked movie theaters as part of this ad campaign, but it could be something that we explore later this year. What we found, we have advertised in movie theaters, and it is great because it's the captive audience. You remember when we did that, which was really fun. And I would like to look into it again. One of the things that if you all go to the movies that you might notice now is that before the movie plays, well in advance before the movie plays, they have more of like the local advertisements, which are more cost effective. And then right before the movie plays, they tend to be larger entities like Toyota or something like that, for example, so it gets a lot pricier, but it's definitely worth looking into again. And we have videos and new videos that we're creating, so I'll do that.
Super. Great, thank you. Any other questions for Jamie? Good, thanks Jamie, good to see you. We haven't seen you in a while. You've been busy, yeah?
Yes, thank you.
So the only other last thing I would say is to remind everybody, I'm sure you saw it in the packet, that we have a regulatory executive summary and a legislative executive summary, and I think Jeremy and Shalini are doing such a great job in how they present the information that I hope everybody looks at it. It's really user-friendly. So, any other board and staff members? Seeing none, we can adjourn. Thank you, everybody.